کهکشان مقاومت ایران 1402 کنفرانس دادخواهی. محاکمه سران رژیم آخوندی به خاطر جنایت علیه بشریت و نسل کشی. سخنرانیهای شخصیت‌های سیاسی و حقوقی، قانونگذاران، وکلا و کارشناسان ویژه ملل متحد از کشورهای مختلف جهان. پروفسور آریل دولیتسکی، رئیس کارگروه سازمان ملل در رابطه با ناپدیدشدگان اجباری 2015. وقتی ناپدیدسازی در چارچوب یک حمله عمومی علیه یک جمعیت غیر نظامی انجام شود، این جنایت علیه بشریت است. و آنچه در سال 1367 اتفاق افتاد و آنچه در دوران دیکتاتوری نظامی در آرژانتین رخ داد، جنایت علیه بشریت بود.
Thank you so much. I spoke in front of the UN General Assembly. I spoke in front of the Ambassador of Germany in my last speech as Chair Rapporteur of the UN Working Group on Enforced Disappearances in front of the Human Rights Council, but I never spoke in front of such committed public like this one. And I feel intimidated by that. With two numbers that we heard this afternoon. The first one, 30,000. 30,000 victims of the massacre. And I want to relate the 30,000 with the 30,000 disappeared in my country, in Argentina, during the dictatorship. 30,000 people disappeared in the dictatorship between 1976 and 1983. Among those who disappeared were two of my cousins, Tilly and Moni. One disappeared in 1977, the other in 1976. And as was already explained, in those years there was no a UN working group on enforced disappearances. In fact, the mothers and grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo pursued the creation of such a specialized procedure that was created in 1980. In 1980, when the first thematic special procedure of the UN was created, the UN Working Group on Enforced Disappearances was known as the Argentine Working Group. And when the advocates, the Argentinian advocates, were trying to pursue the UN to create this working group, the ambassador of the military dictatorship was chasing those human rights advocates in the hallways of the United Nations. And their courage, similar to yours, was what led to the creation of that UN working group. But let me tell you the other number that I want to share with you, 35. This year is the 35th anniversary of the 1988 massacre. Let me tell you what happened in the 35th anniversary of the UN Working Group on Enforced Disappearances. 1980, 35 years later, 2015. In 2015, me was the chair rapporteur of the UN Working Group on Enforced Disappearances, the first Argentine to serve in that capacity. And we were able to meet, to celebrate those 35 years of existence of the working group in the former detention center in Argentina, the ESMA. 5,000 people passed through there. Most of them were tortured, most of them were killed. And 35 years later, I was sitting there representing the United Nations on behalf of all the victims of enforced disappearances. So there is hope. There is hope. 35 years keep us fighting. And let me tell you that when we talk about disappearances, we don't talk about yours disappear. We are not talking about their disappear. We are talking about our disappear. We are all responsible for the clarification of the disappearances of everybody. What is a disappearance and why we, instead of talking about a massacre, we are talking about a disappearance? The disappearance is the deprivation of liberty by a state official, carried out by the denial, followed up by the denial of any information about the fate or whereabouts of the persons who disappear. That's exactly what happened in the stories that we heard, in the stories that you shared with us. But most importantly, despite that I started with numbers, these are not numbers. These are real people. They were fathers and mothers. They were daughters and sons. They were friends, as we heard. They all have hopes. They all have ideals. So when we repeat 30,000 people, remember the 30,000 individuals who disappear and their own humanity. And let's start by a definition of enforced disappearance. Every single enforced disappearance is a state crime because it's carried out by state officials. So when we are dealing with enforced disappearances, we are dealing with state crimes. And let me tell you that many times when we had to talk about enforced disappearances, they tell us that the disappearances are a question of the past. They are a question of the dictatorships in the southern corner of Latin America, or they disappeared in 1988. Well, no. The disappearance and enforced disappearances are a question of the present for two reasons. The first one and most important, for all of you, for all the relatives of the persons who disappeared in 1988, enforced disappearances is a continuous crime. It continues until the fate and whereabouts of the person who disappeared is clarified, until the families receive information on what happened with their loved ones, until the bodies of those who disappeared are returned to their families so they can give a proper burial and they have a place where they can remember and pay their due respects. Until then, the crimes keep being committed every single day. But secondly, it's not a question of the past, because today there are disappearances happening in different parts of the world. In fact, in my last speech, and probably the ambassador remembers, I pointed to all the state representatives sitting there at the Human Rights Council, and I said, I've been sitting here for 3 hours. In these 3 hours, at least 10 people disappear in one of your countries, according to our own statistics. So while we are sitting here, your governments, or one government in the world, is still carrying out disappearances. So it's a question of the present also because of that, because today we are still using enforced disappearances. And we heard crimes against humanity and genocide. When the disappearance is committed in the context of a generalized attack against the civil population, that's a crime against humanity. And I would consider that probably what happened in 1988, and for sure what happened during the military dictatorship in Argentina, were crimes against humanity. And disappearances could also be part of a genocide. But regardless if we define this as a genocide or a crimes against humanity, enforced disappearances are a technique of terror. What the regimes intend to do when they practice disappearances is terrorize the civilian population. And let me tell you, we heard, and I use the number 30,000. But when we talk about enforced disappearances, the victims are many more. The victims are not only those who disappear. The victims are all of you relatives of those who disappear. Because according to international law, according to the International Convention on Enforced Disappearance, a victim is not only the person who disappeared, but everybody else who suffered a harm due to a disappearance. So when we are talking about disappearances, we are talking to many more people than just those who disappear. And when we heard today about the right to truth, the prosecution of those responsible, that's not something that is given to you. That's a right that you have. It's the right to achieve justice. It's the right to have accountability. And in the cases of enforced disappearances, the investigation, the criminal investigation, the investigation of the perpetrators should cover two things. One is the criminal responsibility. That's very important. But second, and probably more important, is investigating the fate and whereabouts of those who disappear. We need to know what happened and where they are. And that's essential in the case of enforced disappearances. And not only that, but the relative have a right to the truth, to know what happened, why it happened, who did it, why they did it, who ordered, who covered up, and who provided all the elements to secure that that crime was perpetrated by the state. And let me finish by saying that the international community has a role to play to cooperate, a role to play to investigate, a role to play to force any regime to investigate and bring a closure to the relative of those who disappear. And I will finish remembering a writer, an Argentine writer, Julio Cortázar, who in the first seminar on enforced disappearances in 1980 said, in a room full mainly by lawyers and diplomats, but also by relatives of those who disappear, he said, we need to feel today in this room the silent presence of those who disappear. They are interrogating us. They are asking us for solutions. And for me, the solution is what a mother of a disappeared in Pakistan told us. She asked us, the member of the UN group, what would you do if the person who disappeared was your daughter? That's what we want the international community to do. What each of the diplomats, each of the governments, each of the presidents, each of the ministers of foreign affairs would do if their daughter was the person who disappeared. When everybody in good faith is able to answer that question is when we will achieve accountability and overcome impunity. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this part of this afternoon's programme, we will be watching and listening to the second of our third witness testimonies from Mr. Asghar Mehdizadeh.
من اسغر مهدیزاده 13 سال در زندان‌های مختلف رژیم خمینی بودم. ابتدا در زندان‌های شمال و بعد در زندان ایوین و گوهردشت بودم. 6 سال در زندان گوهردشت بودم و در زمان قتل عام‌ها هم در همین زندان بودم. من خاطرات زیادی از برادران و خواهران دارم به دلیل ضیق وقت به یک صحنه اشاره میکنم که اون صحنه بود که من بردم به سالن مرگ شاهد اعدام مجاهدین خلق باشم که این صحنه رو به چشم دیدم و هرگز یادم نمیره. روز سه‌شنبه 18 دو پاسدار اومدن منو بردن جلوی سالن مرگ در طبقه همکف. از بغل دستی پرسیدم چه خبره؟ گفت که هر کی تازه میاد این رو میبرن داخل سالن مرگ شاهد اعدام بچه‌ها باشن. در همین حال پاسداری اومد با صدای بلند گفت که شیر اصلی ها بلند شن. 12 تا از بچه‌ها بلند شدن، شعار میدادند یا حسین، درود بر مجاهدین. به دنبالش 5-6 نفر هم بلند شدند. پاسدار گفت که شما در اعدام شدن هم از یکدیگه سبقت میگیرید. این بچه‌ها هیچ ترسی از مرگ در اینا نبود، انگار مرگ را به سخره گرفته بودند. تا اینکه سری 4 را میخواستن ببرن، پاسدار اومد به من گفت که بلند شو. من همراه پاسدار رفتم داخل سالن مرگ. وقتی اونجا رفتم از زیر چشم‌بند دیدم که زیر سن پیکرهای بچه‌ها ریخته. بعدش پاسدار من برد در 30 متری سن قرار داد. اومد چشم‌بند من زد بالا، یک نیشخند تمسخرآمیز به من زد. من یهو چشمم افتاد به بچه‌هایی که رو صندلی ایستاده بودند و طناب دار گردنشون بود. یه لحظه چشم به سیاهی رفت. گفتم خدای این صحنه واقعیه؟ بعد به خودم گفتم که به هر شکلی شده بایستی این صحنه رو ببینم. در همین حین بود که بچه‌ها شعار دادند زنده باد آزادی، درود بر رجوی، مرگ بر خمینی. تنین صدایشون همه سالن رو پوشیده بود. پاسدارا، ناصریان اینا مات و مبهوت شده بودند. ناصریان خطاب به عباسی و لشکری و پاسدارا گفت که اینا منافقن، اینا خبیثند، سریع زیر پاشون رو خالی کنید. که ابتدا ناصریان بعد عباسی لشکری رفتن زیر پاشون رو خالی کردند و از 4 به بعد هم بچه‌ها شعارشون محکم‌تر میشد، هم زیر پاشون رو خالی میکردن، میپریدن. بعد از عقب هم پاسدارا با کابل اینا به سمت پیکر بچه‌ها میرفتن، هم میزدن هم به پیکرشون آویزون میشدن که زود تمام کنن. که صحنه اینقدر تکان دهنده بود که دیگه نتونستم تحمل کنم، تعادلم به هم خورد. بعد متوجه شدم که رو صورتم آب میریزن. اینجا بود که دیگه همونجا با خودم با بچه‌ها تجدید عهد کردم که با پیوستن سازمان راهشون و آرمانشون رو ادامه بدم.